on my Discord channel, I've noticed that there are quite a few of you that are looking to be able to get this effect where it has almost like a tassel that's flowing, or a ribbon, or really fluid hair. And this is actually relatively easy to do with the hair tool. It's just, you kind of have to understand the differences between using the regular animation for the hair tool and using SubWave. So SubWave is like my favorite thing to use in After Effects. I'm going to turn down the audio just slightly. Okay, so SubWave with the hair tool is this fantastic way of getting this fluidity that flows through the hair. So I'm just going to jump into this and show you how to get this effect, and also show you a couple of the new features that I have with the hair tool in general. I have a new version that's out, and there's a couple new features that will make life easier when using the hair tool. So let me go ahead and get in here. I hate shape layers, and create some basic stuff right off the bat and show you some of the new features, and then how to get the animation to flow like in that crazy way. So I'm gonna make a hair really quick. And I like using or moving this registration point over. That way it's easier to animate later on down the line. And then let's get some pins in here. So, I'll zoom in. This part doesn't need to be really perfect. I just want to show you some of the new things that are happening here. All right. So we got our one hair, and I'm going to move this across over. I'm going to just duplicate the layer a couple times and move it over. Duplicate. We could do 3. Cool. So now adding the hair effect. Oops, got to select them. And notice that it's at 3.5, which is the latest and greatest hair tool. Whoa! So if you don't have 3.5, and the best way just to see if you have 3.5 is if you go to the hair tool when you launch it, and then check at the top if it has it or not. So I'm going to run it. All right, it's applying the hair tool to the layers, and here you can see, here's all the layers animated. Woo! Cool, flowing, awesome hair. Okay, so some of the new features that are in here, some of the feedback I got for the hair is that it's not very clear how or when the hair loops, because it definitely loops, and it's made to loop. And so there's a new effect here, or a new controller that you can't really manipulate, but it shows you what's the lowest time frame that this will loop in. So at this frequency of 1, it loops every 1 second. So if I go to like second 1 here, okay, and close out my comp, you'll notice that it's going to loop perfectly in this time frame. And if I were to change the frequency here too, let's say I change the frequency to, I don't know, like 0.5. This is essentially half of the time it takes to do a complete flow or complete rotation. So you'll notice that the animation loops every 2 seconds now, as opposed to 1 second. And this is like super big, because now you could change the frequency, the speed of this. So right now, it's not going to loop. Of course, it's not going to loop. So if I go to 2 seconds, where this shows the smallest loop time, you'll see here, boom, now it'll loop perfectly in that time frame with the speed that I want it to be at. So so with that, you could change this. Maybe I want this to be slower in general. I could drop this down. Instead of the frequency being 0.5, it could be like 0.2. And I should actually do this to the main master control so that we could see it slow down for everything. Let's see, frequency, master frequency. Let's say I put this to 0.2. So now everything is going to go much slower. And if I go to my hair, you'll see it loops every 5 seconds. So if I go to the 5 second mark, close it out, hit run. yes, I will be posting a VOD of this on YouTube, so you will be able to see this later on if you can't make this. So now it's going really slow, but it is looping perfectly, and you could definitely depend on this right here. This animation loops every controller to tell you where that loop time is. And it will, sorry, just to answer the question, yes, I will be posting this on YouTube. So I'll have a new section for streaming, and anytime I do a stream, that section will have this video in it. Okay, so that's one of the new features. And let's go on to one of my new favorite features aside from the loop time setup. I'm going to change this to a bit faster just so we could see what's happening here. So where is it? I put it to 0.2. Let's put it to like 0.4. I like 0.4 because that feels like it has like a nice flow, but it's not like, yeah, super fast. And if I go back to the loop time, you'll see that with that new adjustment, this is at 2.5. So let's get to that point. All right, so now this will loop perfectly in that time frame. So with the hair tool, you know, these are all animating in their own order. They decide when they want to animate based on the location of the hair here. And to best illustrate this, so let's say I want all the hairs to go the same direction, flow exactly at the same time. What I can do is go to my master hair and go down to the master offset spacing and put this to 0. And what this will do is it will tell the script, hey, I don't want there to be any delay in animation between each layer of hair. So now if I put that to 0, there's no delay, so it's going to go ahead and animate exactly the same for every single hair. And that controller is called offset spacing. So if I put this to, let's say, 0.5 or 5, now that spacing is much closer. It's only delayed by a value of 5, and you can see that they're now kind of flowing all nicely together and not so separated. So this is really important to indicate because the old hair tool, you could order the hair tool based on the layering of your hair pieces and then the spacing. So like, let's say, you know, if you look at the hair, it's animating here first and making its way across. Thanks for the follow. You can see this going across. So for instance, as the hair flows backwards, here you'll see that it hits this last hair first and then make its way through the entirety of the hair, right? So it's like hitting this hair, then hitting the second one, then hitting this third one. If I were to move this layer down, like let's say down here, it changes the order. So now it thinks that the order is like these two first and then this one last. So now it's like a little awkward or a little different. So when you have a lot of hairs and you want to make it feel like the wind is coming from one side to another, it's not very easy to do this unless you really pay attention to your layering of your hair here, right? So I wanted to build a feature where it doesn't matter where your hair is in your composition. If you wanted to have the wind flow from here to here, there's a simple way to do this. And so this new feature that I've added is called use windStartPoint. So if I enable this, you'll notice that all the animation changes. And this animation, the order of where the wind starts and ends is going to be based on this new controller called windStartPoint. So this point, I could put this wherever I want. So let's say I put this here. And all of the hair is going to animate from this point first and make its way to the right. The way that this works is this point takes the registration point of each of these hairs. So notice that there's a registration point for each of these. And based on distance from that point, hello, thanks for the follow. Let's say, Anamaya. So if you take the point, the start point, and wherever this distance is over here, this point will indicate where the hair animates first by distance. So this actual point here, this hair is closest to it, so it's going to animate first. This one's second closest, it's going to animate second, third, So if I were to switch this to the other side, it would do what you would expect. The hair will animate from this side first and make its way over to the other hairs. So you can see if I let this animate, you'll see what I mean. I'm gonna see why my music stopped. All right, so notice how this hair is hitting these hairs first and then making its way over to the side. And just to illustrate this even more, I'll get that point again and put it on the opposite side of the hair. And see now the hair is hitting this hair first and making its way over. It's super powerful, like in an environment. If you have hair from like one side of the screen to the other, you can then, you know, just move this point around to indicate wherever that wind is for your entire scene. So I got a question here. Can the hair be used on, well, I guess the hair tool used on hair as the hair is animated to rotate in 3 dimensions, just like the tutorial that you have on YouTube, the hair rotation or head rotation tutorial? Yes, it can. You have to be very delicate about using liquify and hair. Essentially what you would want to do, and maybe I could get an example going, but you would basically have your hair, I'm gonna focus on my hand right here. Okay, you would have your hair. So if I'm the example here, you would have the hair as one layer and you have your face on the other layer. And if you do this head rotation, you would apply that same distortion or another layer of distortion on the flat hair above, so it feels like it has that rotation with it. It would be something I could go into in tutorial format, and I think after I go through this hair, if I still have enough time, I'll definitely jump in and show you how to use that, where you rotate the hair and the head at the same point. Okay, so let me just keep on going with the features here, because I do have a few other ones I want to talk about as the addition to this hair tool. And but I will say, like, my favorite by far is this point. Like, I can't tell you how many times I needed something like this, and I had to like hand place where the wind is and try to imagine the rest of the scene. So you know, make use of this new feature, because it took me some time to develop this in. Okay, let's see what else I got in here. So I have a FallOff key feature, which was already part of the hair tool, but I want to go into detail about what this actually does. So I think this is a good point to switch over and actually recreate this look, starting with that FallOff. So I already have another comp here. It has all of the points already inside of this, so I don't have to actually go through this process. But this hair is just, you know, a triangle with puppet pins on it. So if I were to apply the rig to it, we should get some animation right off the bat, and I'll jump in and show you FallOff. So here you'll see I have the animation. That's the default one from the hair tool. And if you were to hit U on the actual layer to see the keyframes on here, there's an effect on here called FallOff. And again, this was already part of the hair tool, but what I wanted to introduce in this version is more customability to each of the points part of the hair. So you'll notice here that there are 2 sets of keys. One is FallOff and the other is SubFallOff. And what FallOff does in this case, let me make sure I have the actual keys. This shows every single bone part of the hair tool as a key, and the power of the hair tool over time to each bone. So for instance, if I were to actually showcase all of the pins again, so here's the pins, right? And let me actually just show this one. This point here would represent that first pin. The second one, second pin, third, fourth, and so on and so forth. So if I were to, let's say, increase the power here, because this is basically giving the power or the amplitude of the hair tool over the different bones. If if I were to increase this first one and move it up, notice that the entire hair moves, and that's because this is the base bone. So let's say I went to the middle bone and move this up. Notice that, I guess this is like a little bit further down. Let me go a little bit further back here. So if I were to move this, notice that the amplitude changes towards the center of the bone. So I could get really, really intense, and you could see that it's adding amplitude to that middle bone there. So if I were to, let's say, take all these, maybe these three, it's increasing everything past that point. See, so I could get some really interesting like curling from this. So if I hit play here, the end is curling much more now because I've only increased the power of the bones towards the end of this fall off. So this is really a really powerful tool. Like I use this almost religiously every single time I use the hair tool, because then I could really focus on what parts of the hair I want to have more power in, which of the which of the hairs do I want like the tip to be more powerful, or maybe I want the entirety of the hair to flow up more, but the tip not so much. This is a great place to be able to adjust that amplitude. So, so with that feature out of the way, let's actually talk about how to get the effect that I was displaying earlier. So here, so this effect. So the differences between using regular animation and fall off animation, regular animation and sub animation really comes down to two simple waves that are part of the hair tool. So if I want to adjust the hair, the typical places to do this would be amplitude and frequency, right? So if I were to up the amplitude to, let's say, like 8, of course the hair is going to be way more powerful and move, as you can see here, so much more. But if I were to drop this down, let's say to 2, we get a really subtle animation, nothing too crazy. But there are two types of waves that you can manipulate in the hair tool. So let's go ahead and let me show you the differences between the regular way and then what I'm calling SubAmp. So the regular way is you just increase the amplitude here, and you've already seen this. If I put this to 8, and let me actually change one other thing. I'm going to change delay to 2, making it spread out a bit more throughout the hair. And I'm going to also clamp this composition to 2.5 seconds, because that's where the loop time is. Let this run. And you'll notice that there's a lot of power happening here. But if I increase this to a crazy amount, let's say 15, the hair starts to rotate into itself. So notice how it's literally you can't even tell what's happening here. I'll go to 10. All right, there we go. So every single bone as part of the hair tool is rotating the prior bone. So basically it goes from the base bone and it rotates this one, which rotates this one, and so on and so forth. So if I amp up the amplitude of the main hair tool itself, I'm gonna start getting these weird rotating bone things that don't feel like a flow. And that really just comes down to the fact that the main driven point of hair is rotation. So that's why it almost looks like a tentacle in the end, because the more I add amplitude to this hair, the more it's just gonna curl over on itself. So I'm going to show you another way to do this without the curling. So I'm going to put the amplitude to 0. So now there should be 0 animation here. And instead of changing amp, frequency, and all the typical stuff, I'm going to come down here to the same controls, but they're called sub controls. So here there's sub frequency, sub amp, sub delay, all the same stuff that you would get from the regular hair tool. But then it is it's going to apply it in position rather than rotation. So let me go ahead and put, let's say 10 here. 10 for amplitude for the frequency. And let's get the frequency, let's put it to 0.8, just slower, and make the delay go to 2. All right, so if I just play this, now we're getting a hair that's flowing that doesn't exactly feel like it's rotating. So to better illustrate this, if I go to, or show the points and go across this, notice how it almost looks like it's a wave that's flowing across rather than what the other version of this was doing, where it was kind of, you know, crawling over in itself. And the reason why this is important is because when you add these two together, I'm gonna make this more intense, so 20. When you add these two together, these two effects together, you start to get that really flowy result from a, you know, tassel or ribbon. So let's do that. Yeah, this is kind of getting a little crazy. So I'm gonna change the subfrequency to be, let's say, 10 right now, so it's not so intense. All right, and I have it at a frequency of 0.8, and then I'm gonna go back to the regular controls, put the frequency to half of the sub wave, so that was at 0.8, so this is gonna be at 0.4. And then I'm gonna give this an amplitude of, let's say, back to 5. So now, those two effects put together should almost feel like a flag, or, you know, some weird flowy object that is like pretty unique. This effect alone doesn't feel like the typical hair tool. So with Subwave, what I really like to do with it, now that we have it here and it's, you know, doing its thing, there's another control here called SubWaveDirection, and this will change the position of each of the pins as they animate up and down. So with the subwave, you know, with the subwave taking these points and changing its position going up and down based on these bones, you can tell it which direction you want the position to change from. Right now it's going straight up and down, but if I rotate this subwave, it will start to change which direction that those pixels move. So let's say I put it like back here. So this means it's going to go horizontally. It's going to move in position horizontally. So where the regular hair tool is rotating the hair, the sub wave changes the position in whatever direction I choose with SubWaveDirection. And you can already see, like, this is such an unusual look that is really hard to get with 2D assets. And it almost looks kind of 3D here, whipping back and forth. And that's literally just from changing SubAmp. Like, that's it. So if I put this like 1.5, like 15, each of those bones are going to move 15 pixels in whatever direction I tell it with this subwave. Yeah, this is almost looking like a whip now. All right, let me change the direction. Maybe go in a diagonal. Yeah. I mean, kind of like a tail now, like. Yeah. And if you want to use this and make it feel more like a tentacle, what you want to do is change the value of frequency to a negative value. So the difference between hair and a tentacle really comes down to what point is flowing first. I kind of call it like smart and dumb effects. So a smart effect, well, let's say a dumb effect. A dumb effect is, you know, it changes and manipulates based on its environments around it. But a smart effect is something magical because it almost feels like it has its own mind. So like, for instance, like when you watch Harry Potter and you see them use like some sort of electric effect or magical effect, the reason why it feels magical is because it's moving on its own. It almost has its own energy. So the same applies to like a tentacle or to hair. Hair is basically a dumb effect. It's flowing with whatever is in its environment. But then, you know, a tentacle would be moving on its own, doing its own thing. So if we go the other direction, so right now, this feels like something else is controlling it, like a wind is picking it up from underneath. So if we were to change the direction with frequency, so let's go to my controls, and let's say I change the subfrequency to a negative number, and then same goes with the regular frequency. So change this to a negative number. Now it's gonna feel like it's doing its own thing. It's gonna feel like it's deciding where to go as an object. So here, I don't know why it's freaking out right now. There we go. So now it feels like it's almost like this thing that's alive trying to flow or go somewhere because the tip is the one that's driving the motion as opposed to the other way around, where it almost feels like it's coming from a different direction. Yeah. So, of course, all the effects are kind of like intense right now. And I'm going to undo so we go back to what we were playing with here. All right. And re-rendering it. My After Effects is struggling. I don't know why. There we go. Yeah, I when I use this for hair, I like getting it to this point and then just messing around with this direction because it really gives you a lot of different types of shape look based on where you move this direction to. Yeah. All right, something else I wanted to cover. How much RAM do I have? I have 64 gigs of RAM, so it definitely won't have a problem rendering this and keeping it into RAM preview. So something else I wanted to show is how to use the global effects or the global controls, because oftentimes when I see other people using this script, I'm not seeing them really get into the very expansive like global aspect of changing variables. So like here, I'll jump out of this, create a new comp, and drop in the two different hair scripts two different hair examples I have here. So let's drop this guy in. Oh, I can't do that one. Here we go. This one and the whip. Boom, here's both of them, and I'll just scale them down just to see both of them in the frame. So here, and let's scale this one down as well. All right, so they're both here, yay. And let's make it so that we can see everything in this. All right, cool. So when you're, animating hair in your illustration comp, or whenever you have an art piece that you want to have, like for instance, maybe pigtails in one comp and individual hairs in another comp, but you want to change how the hair looks across all of these, all the different comps that you have for your hair. It's not very fun or not very easy to change that when you have to go to every single comp and change all the values, right? Well, there is a place that you can change all of these at one go, and it's called global. So I'm gonna lock this here and open up the global comp. This gets automatically added every time you use the hair tool. So as soon as you hit, hey, run hair script, this thing pops up in your composition, well, in your project file. So if I go to this and look inside of it, you'll notice that here it has all of the similar controls on this layer that you normally see inside of your regular hair comp, but it's called global, and it will affect everything in your entire project. So let's go ahead, and I'm gonna move this to the side so we can see both of the compositions together. So I have access to this, and if I were to, render this, we already know what this looks like, but let's say I wanna change the speed of both of these comps at the same time. Well, if I go to the global area and then go to, let's say, frequency here, I could put this to 0.5, and now this will change the frequency to half for everything in my project. So now if I run this is gonna essentially run at half the speed. So you can see it slowing down a lot. And let's do the same with SubAmp, or subfrequency. So I put this to 0.5. All right, now both of these are gonna go at half the speed. Go over here, hit render. It's pretty surprising that it takes this long to render. But anyways, now you can see it's flowing at half the speed, both of them. And this is basically what I use whenever I really need to break up my hair and make it much slower. You know, rather than having to go to every single comp. Like that's just a waste of time, and it's much easier to do this at this like global scale. I feel like I want to have like a few versions of this whipping hair. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and change the values back in the global comp. I'm gonna change this back to what it was by default. And then I want to add another one of these hairs and see if I can get them to flow in a very similar way. So let's go here and jump this back to 1, put this back to 1. And then let's go back inside of this comp. And I no longer need this locked. Let's kill this one. All right. So with this, I'm gonna go ahead and give this a name. Hair 1. Hair 1. And here we go. I'm gonna move this down too. Now it's starting to almost feel like a squid arms or cool. So I can say that this is too, you know, maybe too powerful for the sub frequency, so or SubAmp. So I'm gonna actually drop that down a little bit. Maybe go to like a little over half. See what that gives us. Yeah, this is now getting closer to that hair look, almost like the smaller hairs were like, you know, like pigtails. Oh, hey, what's up? Ellie, you're here. Hi. What love? You got love. Well, that's basically it that I wanted to show. So if there's anything else that you guys want me to go over, like, just let me know. Otherwise, I think that this is at a pretty good spot.